I have some lettering here, and I have a paint by numbers canvas. I will explain that canvas in just a moment. But I am going to make an intro and an outro because apparently the most difficult part of making a video for me is saying hello and goodbye. So that is what I'm going to be making today. Now, how I did the lettering, I just went on the laptop, got some lettering on the screen, zoomed in, blew it up, traced it straight off the screen, went over it in a fine line pen, and there is the lettering. Now, this is the canvas that I am going to use. Now, the picture that this canvas is supposed to be is this one here, this beautiful dandelions. Now, if you have any experience doing any sort of paint by numbers, you will know that the hardest colours, the hardest numbers to cover are the ones that are yellow and orange and pink. And that is a lot of yellow and orange. Now, I do like the picture, but I'm just not sure this canvas is going to make a very nice paint by numbers picture once it's done, because look how dark those numbers are printed. I have a couple of other canvases here. I'll just pull it out. So, you see the difference? One is like a light grey and the other is black. And because no two paint by numbers canvases are ever the same, this is a different kind of canvas. These are the kind of canvas that I don't actually like, but you can see how that is printed. Still, more in line with this one. And then the third kind is this one here. And again, you can look at the print, the numbers, and it's just, they're so bold and they're so black. I really don't think this is going to make a nice picture. But I am going to, first of all, coat this in white primer. Now, this is the one that I use. Now, you can call it gesso or gesso if you like. I call it primer because I know how to pronounce that. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is dilute this primer because it's really too thick to be used. Straight onto the canvas, even if you do want to cover it up the way that I do. Now, I have seen people say never ever use white primer. Obviously, I completely disagree with that because I don't use it neat, I use it diluted. I have a syringe here. It's actually a children's medicine syringe, so I'm trying to keep the logo out of the way because there's a lot of touchiness over copyright and advertising. But I just use one syringe. I'm going to do two because I think this is going to need two coats. So I just fill the syringe right up. And I always do the primer first. And then 2 syringes of water. And that helps to clean out the syringe, which is the reason you always do the primer first. So I'm just going to give this a mix in. And by the time I'm done, the consistency is going to be like milk. And that is exactly what I want, because when I put it on the canvas, it's going to be a very thin layer. And so it's going to be transparent. It's also going to be very, very fast drying, which means I will be able to get on with the rest of it very, very quickly. Now I just have to make sure, I can bring it in a bit closer, you might be able to see. There are still some lumpy bits. So we'll just carry on mixing for a little bit longer. I have mixed in the primer with the water. There's no more lumps. It's all nice and smooth. So I'm just going to show you how it covers the canvas, how quickly it goes on, how quickly it will dry. And we'll see if I'm going to do 1 or 2 coats of this. I'm going to do the entire canvas because I do intend for the entire thing to be painted, so there's no point in just doing a little section. And I'm just going to start in the top corner. And as you can see, it's very, very thin. But that is actually what you want. Just get it spread out. And you can already see that as thin as it is, it does make a difference to the print. I think maybe 2 coats is going to be needed, but I'm going to go and finish the rest of this and we'll come back and see if I need 2 coats or not. So I have done 1 coat of the primer and I think that's all I'm going to do. I think if I do a second coat, now the numbers are still really quite dark, but I think if I do a second coat, it's going to obscure the design a bit too much. But actually, let's just try it here. So, okay, I had a bit more on my brush than I thought, so I'm just going to try it here. And we'll see how that dries. And I know it looks quite dark just now, but we'll see how that dries. And one of the things I want to say is be very light with your brush. I'm like just brushing over the very, very top of the canvas, because if you press really hard, what you're actually going to end up doing is blurring instead of just coating over the top. So I'm just going to leave that little patch there and we'll see how that dries. Because it really is still quite dark. And so that was 1 coat of primer, and you can see that you can still see all of the design, still see all of the numbers very clearly. Now, this is what I have left over. So that was 1 coat of this entire canvas, and it was a 5ml syringe that I used. I maybe should have said that. So it was 10ml of water and 10ml of primer that went into here, and I used about half. Also, I like to put the primer on with a small brush. I tried using a bigger brush, you know, like for one that's more for painting and decorating walls and things, but I like using just a little one. I have more control over how much is actually going onto the canvas. That is just my personal preference, but if you wanted to use a bigger brush, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't. So I think maybe a second coat is in order. Look how that's drying. I think maybe if I zoom out a little bit, you can see a bit better. I think maybe a second coat, or even just a second coat of the bigger areas. The smaller areas, I think I'm risking losing some of the design. Look, if I can get this camera to focus, yeah, in here, I'm risking losing some of the design on the smaller areas, so I just might go over the bigger areas a second time. Then we'll move on to the next bit. Now, I haven't really explained what it is that I'm doing. Obviously, at the moment, I am tracing the lettering onto the paint by numbers canvas. I just pinned everything to my living room window, and I'm using the sun as my light board. Now, I'm going to paint the words and only the words, and I'm going to use the colours that are supposed to be on each part of the canvas, as it would be if the picture was getting completed fully, which I do intend to do, but to begin with, I'm just going to do the words, and then I'm going to use those to make my intro and my outro. So now this is all ready for painting. It's all completely dry, all the primer, and well, obviously it was before I put the lettering on. My camera doesn't really seem to want to focus at the moment, but this should be much easier to cover than it would have if I hadn't. There we go, that's better. If I hadn't done the primer. So now, what I am going to do, I'm going to have a look at these paints, because this paint by numbers kit is about a year old. Right, so I'm going to open up these paints. And I'm going to keep the picture. I keep them all. I've got like a little black book that I'm going to put them all in, and hopefully when I start raffling these off, I will be able to put some winners' details there, so I can look back in a year's time and see how far I've come. Now, I don't like the pots being connected like this. I much prefer it when they're individual and they are in a tray. Also, because when you open the pots, you're going to put your finger over here to open. These numbers, they're not going to stay. They're going to get rubbed off very easy. So one of the first things I do is actually just renumber them. So I've got some sticky dots here, and I've just used biro to put the numbers on, because this way I'm not going to rub the number off. And now when you do a paint by numbers, you get to know what colour's what. But sometimes once they've dried, it can be quite difficult. Like 7 and 8, there's probably not very much in that. And 13, 14 and 16, well, when you look at them upside down, there's a difference. But anyway, this is just what I like to do. Like I say, there really is no, that's just my own personal preference, so that the numbers will not rub off. Now, the other thing I do is I have a little baby Stanley here, and I'm going to separate all these pots, and I'm going to do it very simply. If I can get the right angle here, I am just going to get it right in here, if you can see that, right in here, and then push. And it makes a satisfying little click. So number 1 can go in this tray. And then the same thing with number 2, if I can get the camera angle right. And the reason that I take them off that way, and I'll see if I can move these and just do one more, and I just take it right down the side of the pot. And pop it in here. Now, sometimes they come and they're already in the tray, and what the company have done is just cut it off right in the middle, which means that your pots aren't going to sit properly. They're going to be, you're going to have to maneuver them a bit to get them to sit next to each other, and that I don't think could be more irritating. So there's something very satisfying about just hearing that little, and sometimes they ping, so you can get this one to ping. There we go. It's so satisfying. I will have to go and pick that up, but you know what, it's fine, because I'm the one that cleans up mess in my house, so I'm allowed to make it. So okay, so I have all my little pots, nothing sticking on the side. Now, I have had just a quick look through these before I turned the camera on, just to save us a little bit of time. I just want to show you these 3 pots are the ones that I've picked to use as an example. So you can kind of see, it's just to show you the consistency, if I just dry this off, the consistency of this paint. It's too thick for my liking. I like it to be the consistency of melted ice cream when I'm starting. So I spend 20 minutes to half an hour before I start any painting, just adding 2 or 3 drops of water to each pot, giving it a mix up, and it all depends on like how much water I add. It can be up to 5 or 6 drops. I've seen myself adding a lot more if the paint is really dried out. So number 9 here, this is a bit drier. As you can see, the way that the paint is sitting in the pot, I don't even need to touch it for you to be able to see this is a lot. This will probably need 4 or 5 drops to get to the consistency that I like, and that's fine. I just use water because generally I do this a couple of times for each colour, and I do this a few times for each paint throughout Paint by Numbers, and it does actually, if I was buying something, I would probably go through quite a lot of it. This is the driest paint that I have in this set, and as you can see, it really is quite thick. Now, if you're a real artist, that's probably a perfect consistency for you, but I'm not, and what we're doing is colouring in with paints, and so you really do need it a lot thinner than that to be able to work with properly, and so that you know you are not going to be running out of paint, because with these yellows and oranges and the blues and greys, I mean, we could be looking at a few coats even with putting the primer on first. But I have to say, now I'm going to turn, the paints are all quite thick, they all need a little bit thinned out, so I'm going to turn this entire thing upside down just to show you, so you can see without my little dots getting in the way. But look at that palette. Look at that range of colours. I think this painting is going to be so beautiful once it's done. I am intending on finishing it after I've done this. So we'll take out number 3, number 9 and number 12 again. And I'm just going to show you these getting thinned down, and then we will move on to the actual painting. So what I have here is just a little cup of water. It's my daughter's old cup from when she was a little toddler. Now I've just realised I've done the wrong thing. I should not have used that water because my syringe isn't filled yet. Hang on. So here we go. I've got a little cup of clean water that I'm going to use to rinse this. This is my stirrer. Some people recommend using cocktail sticks. I find it takes far too long to mix using a cocktail stick. So I broke the handle off a ruined paintbrush, and I just use that. And the only reason I have some masking tape on the end is so that when it's in with my paintbrushes, I can find it easily. And a jug of clean water, because this syringe is going to need to be filled a couple of times. It's the same syringe I used earlier on. It's a 5ml syringe, only this time I've put tape around it so that there's no child medicine branded logo on show. So I'm going to start with this one, the easiest one. I'm just going to add 3 drops in here. Oh, that was a 4th. And now I'm just going to mix it up, and you'll be able to see the consistency that I like to get. Now it does take a little bit of mixing. This is the reason I don't like using cocktail sticks. I much prefer just using this old paintbrush. Now I can't seem to keep my hand still, but I'm just mixing a little bit more slowly now so you can see a bit better. And the other ones I will do on the table, and I will just zoom in when I'm doing my editing. But there we go. That is the consistency that I like. It's like melted ice cream. Yeah. You see what I mean there? I don't know what maybe it's not what you would call melted ice cream, but that is what I call melted ice cream. Not the whippy stuff, obviously. The whippy stuff just turns to milk and runs everywhere. But yeah, melted ice cream when it's in your bowl and you've had something nice and cozy with it. Which I've never understood, to be honest. I mean, why warm hot chocolate fudge cake with ice cream? But you don't have to understand something to like it. So there we go, number 3 is done. And I'll just give it a little rinse in my little cup here. And then I have some tissue over here that I'm just going to give my end a wipe on. And just give it a twist so that it comes off easier. Now it's nice and clean and ready to be used on the next one. So we're going to do number 9. I am going to do number 9. And I'm going to do it down here. And hopefully I'll just be able to zoom in when I'm editing. I'm going to put in 5. Now, I can like guesstimate because I know that if I overdo it and I make it too runny, all I have to do is leave the paint pot open for half an hour and it will be the consistency that I like. Now, if I can keep my hand out of the way actually and let you see this. I'm just mixing in. And the other thing is, if I have paint up in the lid, this one's not so bad because it's just a tiny little bit, but if it's a lot of paint, I have to get it out of there. I have to get it out of there. And again, this consistency, this is the consistency that I like to paint with. Now, I just want to say right now as well, that it's not me thinning down the paints that affects whether numbers on the canvas are going to cover or not. It does not affect the pigment. I have been watering down paints since I started to paint by numbers. Some paintings, now I'm just going to give this one 6 and then I'll probably have to add some more. Some paintings, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some paintings, the numbers cover absolutely no problem, but usually you'll still need to do 2 coats because, I mean, it's like, even if you're painting a bedroom wall, the first coat's always going to be a bit patchy, and it doesn't seem to matter when I'm doing a paint by numbers how pigmented or how dark or light the colours actually are. 2 coats is usually necessary. Now that is perfect. I did think I was going to have to add a bit more to this, but there was actually less in this pot than it looked. So that is what I'm going to do with all of the paints, and then I'm going to get started painting my lettering. Look at that. That is just perfect. That looks like caramel ice cream. But yeah, I really do like this colour palette. I really think these colours are going to be quite nice. And actually, I'm just looking at this pot and realising I'm not happy with it because I'm concentrating on where I actually have this on screen, because I've tried to do a video like this before and I just set the camera and then I kind of like put tape on the table to say where I should, you know, have all my stuff, and it turned out such a disaster that it just deleted the whole thing. I didn't even try and add it into the video it was intended for. So look, I'm just scraping this dry, or scraping it as much as I can, and I'm going to just mix this in with it. Now we will come across one at some point during one of these videos, but if you open a pot and it's really dry and you're mixing it up and it's full of little lumps, what you do is add a few drops extra water, close the pot, give it a shake, and then leave it either until the end if you're going through your pots like I am, or half an hour, and go back to it and give it another mix. It kind of just gives the paint and the little lumps a chance to start dissolving, and it makes it a lot easier. I have never come across a paint that is so dry I can't work with it so far doing these, but if I ever do come across one, I will be sure to let you know. But I actually have a shoebox full of paints that I keep from previous paint by numbers. So even if I have a paint that I can't use, there's a good chance I'll be able to find something very, very close to it in my shoebox. So I'm just about done watering down all my paints. I only have the 2 darkest colours to do because I always leave them till last. I just want to show you this, and I'm going to show you this in later videos as well. But no matter what the colour scheme is for the painting, after rinsing off this in here, every time I'm done with a colour, it always ends up looking like tea. And because I always have Roger on my table, it's the name of the rooster, not the name of the cup. I don't name inanimate objects, but this is my teacup. And I have just had a cup of tea, by the way. So sometimes it is a bit of an effort to make sure that I'm not reaching for this. But I will show you again on a completely different colour scheme that somehow it ends up looking like tea.
So here we are finally at the actual painting. Now, I was very careful in the parts of the painting that I used for lettering. I didn't use the centre of the dandelions because I figured they would be far too busy. Having done this before, I already know how difficult it is to see which are my lines and which are the design lines, which means figuring out which colour is supposed to go where is actually a lot more difficult than I ever expected. Despite it being difficult, I still think it's easier than it would be if I just did up some lettering and randomised some paint by numbers areas and did it different colours. I would love this to turn out looking like it is supposed to be part of a bigger picture. I have a feeling that it really won't. But as long as I have something that I can use as my intro, as a paint by numbers intro, because all the intros that I can find at the moment, now I don't pay to use the editing app. I don't have the premium version, I just have the free version, and I'm still navigating and still finding new things and other ways that I didn't know you could actually edit. But the intros that I'm seeing are really all geared up for food or travel. I haven't seen anything that's anywhere close to arting and crafting, and maybe it's because they just think that people that are into arts are going to be able to make their own. And, you know, maybe I'm kind of proving a point here by making my own, even though I'm not an artist in any way, shape or form.
I'm going to do a quick video now that I've just finished all of the lettering. And you can see now it's all had 2 coats. The pencil line's covered a little bit better. Now the question is, if I decide to finish this painting, which actually I've already decided I am going to finish this painting, will the words be forever visible? We are going to find out. Not just now. I'm going to do another one first. The other thing I wanted to show you is the paint. This is now how thick number 8 is. So you can see I really do not have a problem with watering that down with a few more drops and carrying on.
Thanks for watching. Hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Bye. Oh, maybe I don't need an outro.